I just finished my first playthrough of Fire Emblem Three Houses, or rather my first 4 playthroughs, and it got me in the mood to talk about Fire Emblem. There were a lot of things I liked about Three Houses, and some things I didn't. It got me thinking, what would I change about it to make it better? Which led me to ask myself the question, what would the perfect Fire Emblem game look like? So that's the question this video looks to answer. I'll look at the aspects of each of my 4 favorite Fire Emblem games and rank them 1 through 4 to figure out how to craft the perfect Fire Emblem game. In Awakening Story, you play as Robin, who wakes up with no memories and is found by Chrom, Prince of Ylisse, who leads a militia called the Shepherds to protect his kingdom. The Shepherds are attacked by a mysterious zombie-like creature called the Risen, and are saved by a masked warrior known as Marth. Plegia's ruler, King Gangrel, kidnaps Chrom's sister, the Exalt Emmeryn, demanding the Fire Emblem relic in exchange for her life. Emmeryn takes her own life to prevent the exchange. This action causes Plegians to lose their will to fight Ylisse, and they start deserting the army, thus giving the Shepherds the advantage they need to defeat Gangrel and end the war. Chrom becomes Ylisse's Exalt and has a daughter, Lucina. 2 years later, Chrom faces another threat, Walhart the Conqueror from Valm. Chrom and company sail to Valm to stop him with extra ships supplied by Plegia's new king, Valadar. And oh yeah, Marth reveals her true identity as Lucina, Chrom's daughter, from a future where Grima destroys the world and she travels back in time to try and prevent it. After fighting their way through Valm, the Shepherds face Walhart and kill him, but their troubles aren't over yet. It turns out Robin is actually Valadar's child and the vessel for Grima's return. The Shepherds defeat Valadar, but Grima emerges. Using the strength of the Fire Emblem, the aid of the Great Dragon Naga, and the power of friendship, our heroes defeat Grima. Robin is then faced with one final choice: sacrifice themselves to destroy Grima, or let Chrom seal him away for another 1,000 years. This story is great, in my opinion. Robin's mysterious past, the bond between Chrom and Robin, having to choose between sacrificing yourself to destroy a great evil or sealing it away to make it someone else's problem in 1,000 years, it's good stuff. I'm not the biggest fan of time travel, but I think this is a very non-egregious use of it, and Lucina is a great character. So overall, I give Awakening Story a 9 out of 10. Fates is about the 2 warring nations of Nor and Hoshido. The player character Corrin, a royal from Nor, has lived in isolation under the watchful eye of their siblings and King Garon. Corrin finds themselves in Hoshido, and after a series of revelations, they learn they were kidnapped from Hoshido as a child and are actually the child of Hoshidan Queen Makoto. Unfortunately, right after learning this, Makoto is killed in a sudden attack planned by Garon. With war looming between Nor and Hoshido, Corrin faces a life-altering choice. Fight for Nor, the family they've known their whole life but in a kingdom led by an evil madman, or with Hoshido, where their true family is, in a nation striving for the same peace they desire. Or refuse to pick a side and forge their own path. Or they can just join Smash.
Join Smash!
From here, the story changes depending on the choice you make. And I won't spend all day describing everything that happens in all 3 stories, so I'll just quickly summarize. If you fight for Nor, you take orders from King Garon as you conquer Hoshido. Garon's orders are cruel, but Corrin does whatever they can to minimize casualties during the conquest. After defeating the Hoshidan forces and killing your true siblings, Garon sits on the Hoshidan throne, revealing his true form as a gooey entity of evil. Corrin defeats him, but before they can celebrate, an evil version of Takumi appears for the final battle, but thanks to Azura weakening him with her song, Corrin and the gang are able to defeat him, and they all live happily ever after. If you choose to fight for Hoshido, you fight back against King Garon, having to fight through the people you grew up with. Corrin's fight eventually leads them face to face with King Garon, but after defeating him, he transforms into a blight dragon. After defeating him for a second time, the war comes to an end, and they all live happily ever after. If you refuse to choose a side, these 2 warring nations that hate each other's guts team up to try and kill you. Yeah. Corrin escapes, and Azura takes them to the bottomless canyon and they jump in. This transports them to the Kingdom of Vala, a hidden kingdom which Azura reveals is behind all of the conflicts between Hoshido and Nor, which is ruled by an evil dragon named Anakos. Corrin returns to the real world to try and convince their siblings in both Hoshido and Nor to join their fight against the true enemy. After amassing their army, they return to Vala, confront Anikos, and using the power of friendship, defeat Anikos, saving the world, and they all live happily ever after. This is definitely not Fire Emblem's strongest story. I think if the story had been kept more grounded and focused on the conflict between Nor and Hoshido, it could have been good. The moments when you have to kill Xander in Birthright or Ryoma in Conquest are heartbreaking and the highlight of each respective story. But Garen being an evil goo monster to try and justify what Nor has done, and try and give everyone an overly happy ending, is pretty undeserved. On top of that, basically all of Revelation's story is pretty silly. I think Birthright has the best story, followed by Conquest, with Revelations dragging them both back. Overall, this one gets a 6 out of 10. Three Houses takes place in the land of Fodlan, which is split into 3 main territories: the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, the Adrestian Empire, and the Leicester Alliance. At the center of Fodlan is the Garreg Monastery, the center of the predominant religion of Fodlan, as well as the home of the Officers' Academy. You play as Byleth, a mercenary and child of the famous mercenary Gerald. You're brought to Garreg Monastery, where the Archbishop Rhea decides to make you a professor of one of the 3 houses. You then choose between the Black Eagle House, led by Edelgard, heiress to the Adrestian Empire, the Blue Lion House, led by Dimitri, the Crown Prince of Fargus, or the Golden Deer House, led by Claude, the soon-to-be leader of the Leicester Alliance. After a couple of months, Edelgard becomes the new Emperor of Adrestia and declares war on Garreg Mach. In the battle to defend the monastery from the Empire, Byleth falls from a cliff and ends up asleep for the next 5 years. From here, the house you chose earlier decides what happens for the rest of the game. If you chose the Blue Lion House, you regroup with a rage-filled Dimitri and assist him in fighting back against the Empire, trying to resolve the mystery of his parents' murder, and eventually killing Edelgard to end the war and unite Fodlan under the kingdom's banner. Byleth becomes the new Archbishop of the Church, and they all live happily ever after. If you chose the Golden Deer House, you reunite with Claude and help him scheme his way to defeating the Empire while uncovering the secrets of the Agarthan civilization. If you chose the Black Eagle House, you actually have 2 different routes to choose. The first resembles the other 2 houses, where Edelgard betrays you and declares war on the Church. You have to kill her and then deal with those that slither in the dark, where Rhea uses her true form to defend Byleth from the Javelins of Light. In doing so, she is driven mad and you are forced to defeat her in a final battle. However, if you speak with Edelgard during Chapter 11, you gain the ability to side with her. From there, you join her in her revolution, eventually killing Rhea, dissolving the Church, and uniting Fodlan under the Empire's banner. Regardless of which path you choose, you're in for a good story. But to really get the full experience, you have to play through all 4 stories. My biggest gripe with the story in this game is, depending on the house you choose, you get no resolution on major story arcs set up pre-timeskip. For example, in the Blue Lion story, you never learn about the Agarthans, or get any information on who Solon or Kranya were, or why they were doing what they were doing. And the Death Knight is only explained in the Black Eagle story. Overall, it's a great story. It just leaves too many questions if you were only to play through the game once instead of 4 times. So, therefore, I give it an 8 out of 10. In Engage, you play as Alir, the Divine Dragon, who awakens after a 1,000-year slumber with no memory of their past. They learn they are the Divine Dragon and set out to protect the continent of Elios from the Fell Dragon Sombra, who threatens to return and plunge the world into darkness. Alir must gather powerful emblem rings, each containing the spirit of a legendary hero from other Fire Emblem worlds, to stop Sombron and his army. As Alir recovers fragments of their past, they face betrayal, uncover lost secrets, and ultimately rise to prevent the resurrection of the Fell Dragon, protecting Elios from destruction. I really don't have too much to say about this story, because it's pretty weak. While I really enjoy what the emblem rings bring to the gameplay side of things, I think they're really stupid in the story. This story really just boils down to you being the good dragon that has to stop the bad dragon from destroying the world. 4 out of 10. Of these stories, Awakening is my favorite, but I do like the idea of a branching path to give you different versions of the same story. I would definitely keep the amount of paths to a minimum though, Probably only two, similar to Fate's pre-Revelations. So my ideal story would look something like Awakenings, but with an important choice in the first act to give you two unique stories. Each of these games has quite a few characters, so I won't be going over every single one of them, just the important ones and some characters that I have some things to say about. Most Fire Emblem side characters are given one notable defining trait, and that's it. For example, Raphael from Three Houses likes to eat. Therefore, every single time he speaks, he has to say something about how he likes to eat. There is some depth to Raphael, which we'll get into a little later, but a lot of these characters really just boil down to their one given characteristic. To make ranking all these characters easier, I made a chart to order them with these categories: player character, main character, important story characters, side characters, and villains. For player characters, last place goes to Byleth. Mostly because Byleth isn't much of a character, they're more of a self-insert. They stay completely silent, only speaking when the player is given a dialogue choice to make, and even then there isn't any voice acting for any of it. So you just kind of get these silent emotes. Byleth is kind of just there to move the plot forward. Next is Alear, just a very generic character. The twist that they're actually Sombron's child makes them slightly more interesting, but it's also really similar to Robin's twist. Corrin comes in second. Corrin is very anti-violence, which can be annoying at times, but it also makes sense when you think about the position that they're in, having to fight either the people they grew up with or their own flesh and blood. It's tough. Corrin's relationships with all of their siblings is also one of the best parts about the character, as long as you don't reach an S rank with any of them.
Brother, ugh.
Number one for me is easily Robin. The relationship with Chrom, the mystery of their true origin, the choice to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The player character is rarely one of the better characters in each of their respective games, but Robin is genuinely one of the best characters in their own game. For the main characters, fourth place will be Vale and third will be Azura, which is no fault of their own, but more because both Engage and Fates are more focused on the player character than the other main character. Azura has the edge though because she is just more complex than Vale. Second place is Chrom, and he didn't get beat out of first because he did anything wrong. He's just simply outnumbered. Dimitri, Edelgard, and Claude take first because they are all extremely interesting characters that drive their own fascinating stories, similarly to Chrom, but 3 is just better than 1. Last place for the important story characters goes to the Royals from Engage. While they are all individually good characters, they're only relevant for small stints of the story. Similarly, in third place, we have the Three Houses characters like Rhea, Geralt, Sothis, which are all important pre-time skip, but then Geralt dies, Sothis dies, and Rhea is only relevant depending on the house you chose, and she's completely irrelevant in the Blue Lion story post-time skip. In second place is the Royals from Fates. I really wanted to put them in first because they're the best part about the game, but it was a close race with the Awakening characters, and I think simply based on how all the Royals turn on you at the start of Revelations, I have to put them in second. Therefore, first place goes to Awakening, with characters like Lucina, Emerin, Basilio, and Flavia. All of them have major impacts on the story, and some of the most emotional moments in the series with both Emerin and Basilio's sacrifices. The side characters were definitely the hardest category to rank, but I decided on Fates in fourth, Engage in third, Awakening in second, and Three Houses in first. In Three Houses, you start off with almost all of your side characters, as opposed to adding them to your party as the game progresses like in the other games. This lets you get way more attached to each of the characters, and the time skip allows you to see how each of your students changes after 5 years of war. While these characters still fall victim to the single character trait problem, there is depth to be found in the support conversations and especially the paralogs. Like Raphael, for example, who we know as the guy that likes food. After finishing his and Ignaz's paralog, Raphael learns that his parents were likely killed by his friend Lorenz's father. And surprisingly, he handles this information very maturely.
You got no idea what really happened, right, Ignaz? And I bet Lawrence doesn't know either.
The way I see it, it was monsters that killed my parents. They died in an accident. I got no reason to hate anyone or blame somebody else for their deaths. I don't have time for that. I got my little sis to worry about instead.
Raphael.
Now that that's settled, let's head back. What do you think that merchant's gonna send us? I hope it's food.
Are you serious right now, bro?
This level of character depth is not shared for the single trait characters in the other games. As for said other games, I ranked them based on how much I like the side characters. Awakening side characters mostly consist of members of the Shepherds such as Frederick and Lissa, so they feel like they belong. Then you add in some fun characters like Kellum, who's a knight that wears large armor but is so forgettable to everyone that he's essentially invisible. Engage and Fates both give you a couple of retainers every time a royal joins your party. Not as many notable names, because the royalty they come with usually way outshines them. Lastly, we have the villains, where 4th place belongs to Sombron, an evil dragon that wants to destroy the world. Yeah, not a lot there. 3rd place is Garen and Anakos, slightly more compelling than Sombron, and that's about it. 2nd place is the Awakening villains. Gangrel and Walhart are pretty standard Mad King and evil warlord, but Valadar is more interesting. He's established all the way in the tutorial, and you see him a couple times throughout the story not really knowing who he is. Then after the time skip, he's the King of Plegia, and then he's revealed to be Robin's father, that is trying to use them to bring back Grima. He's the best villain so far, but he is far outdone by the villains of Three Houses. I was shocked when Edelgard was first revealed to be the Flame Emperor, and after the time skip, having to kill the past students of the Academy always felt wrong. These were the same students that just a few years ago you walked past in the monastery, fought against in the mock battles, ate with at the dining hall. When killing an enemy makes you feel like the bad guy, that's a good villain. Also, this cutscene at the end of the Blue Lion story,
L.
damn. So, in my perfect Fire Emblem game, the player character would be most like Robin, the main character, or characters, would be like Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude, the important story characters would be like those from Awakening, the side characters like those from Three Houses, and the villains also like those from Three Houses. If you've seen my other videos, you'll know just how much I love a good game soundtrack. Fire Emblem as a series has some of the best music of any games, so there really isn't a right or wrong choice for this category. For the longest time, I thought Awakening had my favorite OST, but when I was reviewing the soundtracks for each of these games for this video, I found that the one with the most total songs I liked was actually Fates. It does this really cool thing where every song has two versions, a light and a dark, depending on whether you're in Hoshido or Nor. And there are just so many great songs. All the battle themes, the cutscene music, and even the downtime music is amazing, and you get two versions of each one. Don't let all of my praise of Fates' soundtrack make you think the other games aren't just as good. Awakening has some of my favorite songs ever. Not just favorite video game songs, favorite songs. Three Houses is full of these epic orchestral themes that just make you feel inspired. And Engage has some really catchy music and also these awesome remakes of songs from older games. Like I said earlier, there's no wrong answer here. I trust Nintendo will create a great OST for their next Fire Emblem game, but if I had to choose one for my perfect game, I would want it to be like the Fates OST, which works out since I want a branching path in the story for the game, so having these alternate versions of each song would also work out really well. Did I make this category just to show off my waifu tier list? Maybe. But believe it or not, there is more to the support system than just romance. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the members of your army and really get to know them, which makes it all the more devastating if you accidentally get one of them killed in battle.
If only I'd live just a little longer.
I don't think any of the games do anything wildly different when it comes to support conversations, but one thing Three Houses does is lock certain support conversations for after the time skip. If you don't get to know your students well enough before the war, they won't open up about things that they might have during the peaceful days spent at the academy. The best thing to come from the support system, though, is child units. For those that don't know, child units are the result of 2 units reaching an S-rank support, resulting in them having a child which can join your army. This child is a combination of their 2 parents taking skills and stats from them. This gives you the ability to craft the perfect unit just by playing Cupid and forcing 2 of your units to fall in love in order to send their kid to war. On top of the romance, character development, and children, the support system also has a practical use, where 2 units give each other stat bonuses based on their support rank with one another, so you're incentivized to make your army bond. With all that being said, I like this support system, and my perfect game would have one that most resembles Three Houses, but with the reintroduction of child units. And maybe it wouldn't hurt to bring Cordelia back again? Half of the time you spend playing Fire Emblem, you aren't actually playing the game. You're preparing for your next battle. Whether you're buying new weapons, changing a unit's class, or anything in between, you need a place to do it. Unfortunately, in Awakening, the Shepherds are homeless. For every chapter you complete, you open a new shop at that location. In these shops, you can buy a limited number of items, sell any unwanted stuff, or forge upgraded weapons. Outside of the shop, you can enter the barracks, which will have a random number of random events occur, ranging from character interactions that will boost support, to finding random and often useless items. Personally, I'm not a fan of the shop system or the barracks. It's mostly just an inconvenience having to travel across all this area just searching for one specific item, and the barracks is usually such a waste of time that I almost never even use it. Fates introduces My Castle, which is a customizable little kingdom located in the astral plane where Corrin and the gang can prepare for their next battle. The members of Corrin's army randomly populate the castle grounds each day, and speaking to them triggers a random event similar to the barracks in Awakening. With each chapter you complete, you earn a dragon point, which you can spend to create a new building. You can build a shop to buy weapons, a shop to build stabs and other items, a forge to craft stronger weapons, a prison to recruit enemy units, and more. The castle is also home to the Invasions mode, missions to defend your castle from invading forces. Overall, I enjoy My Castle. The ability to place each building wherever you want makes it very easy and convenient to traverse. You can also travel very quickly, allowing you to get to any building in a matter of seconds. Each of the buildings has a useful function that adds to your preparations, like the dining hall, which gives all your units a stat boost based on the dish you make, or the prison, where you can recruit enemy units that you've previously captured. The customizability of My Castle also allows the player to add their own personal flair to their castle, making it feel like their own. I'm not the biggest fan of the Invasions mode, but I feel like they can be fun, and they're completely optional as well. Three Houses takes the home base mechanic to a whole new level. Your base of operations is the Garreg Monastery, located in the center of Phobon. With the calendar system this game uses, you will likely spend more time running around the monastery than actually playing the game. In the monastery, you are allotted a certain amount of activity points based on your professor level, which you can use to have lunch with 2 of your allies, attend choir practice, have tea time, or go fishing. I won't lie, I hated this. All of these activities just felt like a chore to do, and I often found myself wanting to do anything else but explore the monastery each week. Running around the monastery is such a pain, because it's way too big, and while there is a fast travel system, you're forced to sit on a loading screen whenever you use it. The shop and blacksmith are relatively the same, with there being a few extra vendors you can gain access to by completing side quests. I think they took the home base too far in this game, but it does get better in the next. In Engage, home is located in the Somniel, an island floating in the sky above Elios. Similarly to Three Houses, you are able to run around the Somniel to access all of its features, but unlike Three Houses, you aren't forced to do so if you don't want to, and the features of the Somniel actually make it worth exploring. It has the standard item shop and armory along with the best blacksmith in all of the games. Each of the emblem rings allows you to apply an engraving to a weapon that gives it certain stat boost, which just adds an extra level of customization to the weapons that previous games didn't have. The arena allows you to get some free XP to help level up units that may be falling behind, or train with emblems to inherit skills. Then there's the farmyard, where you house all of your gambling dogs. You can adopt up to 5 animals to keep in the farmyard that each give you something different every time you visit the Somniel. But the best animal by far is the dogs, because they will randomly give you a material for upgrading weapons. The Somniel isn't perfect though. It still has the travel problem that Garreg Mach does, though not as bad. It's still large enough to require a quick travel system, and it also contains some useless features like the wyvern flying minigame and the fishing pond. However, this is definitely a big step in the right direction. So, I feel like the perfect home base would look like a mix between my castle and the Somniel. All the customization and convenience of my castle mixed with the features of the Somniel would make for the perfect place to spend hours considering which unit you're going to romance.
Oh, wow. I need a minute to think about this.
I've saved the best for last. Our final category is also the most important. I'm talking about core gameplay mechanics. Whether it's the game's main combat gimmick, the leveling system, class system, we're covering it all. And since there is quite a bit to cover, I'll try to go over it relatively quickly. Awakening introduces the pair-up mechanic, which allows 2 units to join forces and act as one unit, where the backup provides bonuses to the lead unit. I'm not the biggest fan of the pair-up system. I don't feel like it adds too much in terms of gameplay. It mostly just helps condense your army into your elite units and the pair-ups to support them. Like all the other games, Awakening has skills. However, these skills are limited to only class skills, requiring each unit to reclass to gain their preferred skills. I personally prefer the later game's skill systems, but I'll get to that in a second. Weapon durability is a mechanic that comes and goes, but it's here in Awakening, and I personally enjoy it. Considering your army's weapons is a core part of the game, and making the weapons have durability forces you to have to play around it, which I like. Fates, on the other hand, ditches weapon durability, but it keeps the pair-up system from Awakening, and it's not much better in this game. The skills, on the other hand, are improved. Every unit now has a personal skill, and while they might not be the most useful skills, I think they add to each of the characters and add an extra layer to choosing which units you want to use. As previously mentioned, the prison allows you to recruit enemy units that you capture. This is awesome. Having the ability to bolster your army with some of your most powerful foes is so cool, and it's a real shame we haven't seen this mechanic return. Because this game has different paths, there are path-specific classes. For example, the Samurai class can't be accessed in Conquest. While at first glance this may seem like a bad thing, I actually like it. A lot of the exclusive classes have very similar counterparts in the other version, but what I like about this is the fact that you won't have units with the same classes when you play through Conquest that you will when you play through Birthright, making each playthrough that much more unique. Lastly, the game's main gimmick is the Dragon Veins. Dragon Veins are interactable spaces that do something special if activated by a unit with Dragon Blood like Corrin, such as create an area that heals you over time, or changes the map by draining a river. While this did allow for some interesting maps, I think this gimmick is too gimmicky. Most levels the Dragon Veins are pretty underwhelming and can just be ignored, but in other levels it's absolutely vital to use them, which is kind of annoying. Hold on to your hats, because we're going from 2D to 3D. Three Houses introduces a lot of new mechanics, the main one being battalions. Battalions are squads of units that can be deployed with each character. Every battalion gives a couple stat boosts and gives the user access to a gambit attack, which are attacks that have varying effects, and some are just straight up overpowered. I like battalions. I think it's cool that you have the ability to give your unit access to these cool attacks, but the big downside is they're kind of a balancing nightmare. Another mechanic, which isn't new but rather reintroduced in this game, that also has trouble with balance is the combat arts. Combat arts are powerful attacks that you can use at the cost of extra weapon durability. Yes, weapon durability is back, and combat arts make it so much better. If you want to use your big strong move, there are consequences, which I think is great. Like I said though, some of these combat arts are very unbalanced. But I feel like this is a problem that can be solved. Skills return once again with both character skills and class skills, and attaining the class skills is a little different in this game than it is in the previous ones. To change classes, a character has to pass an exam. The odds of passing said exam decrease the higher a unit's proficiency in each of the required stats. A character can increase their sword stat, for example, either through tutoring or using a sword in combat. Because of this fact, any unit can use any weapon at any time, gaining access to stronger combat arts as their proficiency grows. I love this system. It gives you the freedom to train any unit in any skill you want. So if you want a certain character to be a certain class, you can just do it, rather than having to find ways through marriage or other means to attain that class. Three Houses also reintroduces the pair-up system, but it improves on it. Adjutants are extra units you can deploy alongside another unit, providing one of three effects. Offensive, which can potentially trigger a follow-up attack. Defensive, which can block an enemy's attack. And support, which can restore health to the main unit. What's great about adjutants is they don't take up a deployment spot, so you can still get the bonuses of the pair-up without having to sacrifice a whole unit. Lastly is the Divine Pulse. Byleth's connection to the goddess Sothis allows them to turn back the hands of time, returning to a previous turn in the combat. I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, it can be incredibly helpful and a huge time save if something goes wrong to just go back a few turns rather than having to do the whole combat over. But it can also completely trivialize the game. If you charge into a fight recklessly and get a unit killed, you can just rewind time and approach more cautiously. Whereas in Fire Emblem games past, if you make a mistake like that, you have to live with the consequences. You don't have to think as tactically when you have the ability to just do over your mistakes, and I don't like that. Unfortunately, the convenience of time travel outweighs its trivialization of combat because it returns an engage, in the form of the Draconic Time Crystal. Once again, I feel the same way about this as I do Divine Pulse. Engage's main gimmick, though, revolves around the emblem rings. The spirits of heroes of Fire Emblem games past reside within these magical rings that when worn by a unit gives them a stat boost, access to their skills, and the ability to engage, which gives them access to a super powerful attack or ability. I love the emblem rings. Not so much the whole Ghost Marth thing, but the practical application of them. They're like battalions, but cooler. Engage attacks like Lodestar Rush and Great Ether are so satisfying to use, and the skills they provide allow you to build units around them. Speaking of skills, this game brings back character skills, class skills, but now introduces the ability to learn skills from the emblems. Would your strongest unit benefit from having a skill like Speed Taker? Well, with just a quick training session with Lynn, they can learn it. The biggest downside to this is the class change system. To gain proficiency in different weapon types, you have to reach a certain bond level with a specific emblem. And if you don't have the ring you need when you want to reclass, you just can't. For example, you learn Tome proficiency from Celica, which you lose access to in Chapter 10 and don't regain until Chapter 20. So if you want a character to reclass to a magic class between Chapter 10 and 20, tough luck. Another new mechanic is the ability to break an opponent. If you attack an enemy with weapon triangle advantage, you'll break them, making them unable to counterattack for the rest of the turn. Personally, I don't like breaks. I feel like it's just another thing to make the game way too easy. If an enemy is any sort of threat to you, just attack them once with a weapon triangle advantage, and they're completely defenseless for the rest of the round. Lastly, there are a few new weapon types added, like great weapons, which hit harder with the downside of always attacking after your opponent, which means they have no downside if your opponent is broken, by the way. And smash weapons will push an enemy unit backwards by 1 space after being attacked by one. I like these weapon types. I think they add to combat variance, and sometimes you can make really cool plays with them, like knocking an enemy back with a smash weapon in order to line them up to get hit by a lodestar rush. So, after all that, these are the mechanics I want to see make a return. Weapon durability, capture, path-specific classes, combat arts, the skill leveling system and class system from 3 houses, character and class skills, the learnable skills system from Engage, new weapon types, and a mechanic similar to Emblem Rings. It's a lot to ask for, I know, but I feel like a combination of all of the best gameplay mechanics can make for an insanely fun game. Well, that about does it. Here's the list of everything I'd want to make my perfect Fire Emblem game. Nintendo, I hope you're taking notes. I know the next Fire Emblem game will probably look nothing like this, but hey, I can dream. I'm fully confident that the next Fire Emblem game will be amazing. Every game in the series is great, and they are on a generational run with the last few entries. I do think Engage was an overall step in the wrong direction after 3 Houses, but it did do some things incredibly well, so I think whatever they do for the next game, it'll be good. But if they really focus on all the best parts of the other Fire Emblem games, they can make it perfect. If you made it this far, I want to thank you. This video ended up being a lot longer than I initially planned it to be, and it took me quite a long time to make, so if you were able to sit through the whole thing, I really do appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what you want to see be brought back for the next Fire Emblem game, and if you want to see more content from me, don't forget to subscribe. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.